What's happening YouTube? Suraj here, and in this video I want to talk to you about gear. More specifically, inexpensive video gear that doesn't suck. First on that list is this, not the camera, but the filter that's on it. This is the K&F Concept variable ND filter. Now for those of you that don't know what a ND or a neutral density filter is, essentially it's like sunglasses for your camera. Sometimes while we're shooting, we're in situations where there's just too much light entering our camera. To make up for this or to get a correct exposure, typically we would close down our aperture or increase our shutter speed. But let's say you want to have a shallow depth of field or you want to have a slow shutter so that you can get light trails or whatever. What do you do in that case? That's where NDs come in. Now, neutral density filters are typically of two types. There's a fixed ND and a variable ND filter. A fixed ND basically is, it has a fixed number of stops. So whether that's one stop, two stops, three stops, there's plenty of different options, but it is fixed. Variable NDs, on the other hand, you guessed it, are not fixed. They have a range. So something like 1 to 8 stops or 2 to 5 stops. Again, there's a lot of different options. But the thing with variable NDs is that they can be pretty expensive. And going by Gerald Dundon's comparison of different ND filters across different price ranges, it looks like these are one of the few rare types of equipment where the law of diminishing returns does not apply that much. In other words, spending more does actually seem to get you more. So the good ND filters that he talks about in his video are the ones that I know of are typically in the 15,000-20,000 rupee price range, and they're probably worth it, but it's a lot of money and I can't really spend that much on a filter right now, which is why I decided to go with this. And at 3,000 rupees, it's not half bad. The reason I specifically need a variable ND filter is because I've been shooting a lot of log footage lately. If you're a Sony user like me, you know that shooting S-Log2 or S-Log3 will automatically set your ISO to 800. You cannot go below that. And so if I want to have a shallow depth of field and shoot an S-Log, there's no way to do it without getting a ND filter, at least in most cases. But speaking specifically of the K&F, firstly, it's built really well. I got it in a 82mm filter thread. Let me see if I can see. I got it in a 82mm thread. The build quality is quite nice, and I got the 82mm because it's the biggest size they have, and then I can use step down rings, which I can't seem to find right now. But essentially I can just use step down rings and use the same filter on all my different lenses of different filter sizes, and I don't have to buy different filters for each lens. And once you screw it back on, it's actually pretty tight in that accidental touches won't like completely or won't move the filter too much or just mess up your markings and ruin your whole exposure. Now speaking of the markings, I don't think they're accurate. I don't believe it. K&F advertises it as a ND2 to ND400 filter, which basically means 1 stop to 8 stops, 8 and 2/3 to be exact. But in my testing, I really only found it to be a 6 stop filter. It's definitely not 8, not even 7. 6 at best, so don't go by the marketing. It's not 8 stops, it's really only like 6 stops. Also, something to note is it turns a full 360 degree, although the markings are only maybe like less than 120 degrees. I'm gonna say the minimum starts somewhere here and maximum ends here, and but it still goes fully, it rotates completely, and in that process it actually goes from minimum to maximum at least 2 times completely. And because of that, and also partly because of physics, you end up noticing a X or a cross pattern across the image. Now this is especially evident on wider lenses. For example, on my 16mm, I could notice it before I even crossed the maximum marking on the filter. With other lenses, it typically happens only after you cross the maximum marking, but with wider lenses it happens a little bit earlier than that. Now personally, I don't have a problem with this. It's just the nature of variable ND filters. In fact, manufacturers actually also acknowledge this behavior. They've explicitly mentioned in the user manual that this will happen. So I don't really know if you can consider it a defect in that case when the manufacturers themselves have acknowledged it. The only filters that seem to be free of this behavior are the ones that don't rotate a complete 360 degrees. aka the more expensive ones. But yeah, even if you use like a slightly tighter lens, even a 30mm or 25, you won't notice it. Other than that, there is a color cast. It's definitely present. It's not very severe, although there is a slight orange color cast. You can see it, it's noticeable. But again, it can be quite easily removed in post. In terms of image sharpness, I don't think I lost much at all for like all practical purposes. I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference if I didn't look at them side by side. And that's about it. I know I picked basically the worst time to talk about an ND filter because most of us are staying home right now and most of the ND usage typically happens when you're shooting outdoors. But for me personally, it's the opposite. I shoot a lot at home and I want to start shooting everything in S-Log so that I can really learn how to color grade and stuff. And that's why I bought this particular variable ND. It's not the best. I will end up getting a premium ND at some point, but for now, this is the cheapest entry to shooting S-Log at f1.4 without compromising the 180-degree rule. And that's all I really need. So that was my first product, the KNF Concept ND2 to ND400 variable ND filter. My second pick, actually, you know what? I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to have my friend Yash talk about it because I think he knows way more about that particular product than I do.
Hey guys, this is Yash and my pick is the friction arm, or it's also known as a magic arm. And this thing is actually magical. So what this does, it basically allows you to mount stuff like microphone or lights to virtually anywhere you can think of. And I'm just gonna go ahead and say this, I love this thing. Of all the camera gear that I've bought over the years, I've probably used this one the most besides the camera itself. And you'll understand why it's so great in just a second. So the friction arm is just these two metal rods that are joined from the middle, where at each end there are 1/4 inch threads on ball joints, which allows the arm to move freely in any direction. The entire arm is tightened and loosened up from this single knob in the middle. So the actual using procedure of this thing is pretty straightforward. So you just have to take the arm, loosen up the middle knob, position the arm the way you want it, and tighten back up the knob, and the arm will hold its position that way. Generally, these friction arm comes with a clamp mount like this, using which you can clamp these up anywhere, and the 1/4 inch thread on the other end makes it super easy to mount stuff directly on it. I've mounted so many things with this over the years. I can't mention all of them, but for example, I've used this to mount microphones, I've used it to mount small LED lights, external audio recorders, external monitors, reflectors, and even my camera with a smaller light lens like a 50mm. But anything more heavier and longer than that will mess up with the balance of the arm and it will not hold it. The one that I'm showing here is more on the smaller size and it doesn't support that much of a payload, but all the things that I mentioned earlier, it handled it pretty much easily. There are more bigger and more sturdier ones available that can support some crazy amount of payload. What's so great about this is the versatility it gives you. You can use this thing as so much, like you can use this as a microphone boom arm, you can use it as a light fixture grip, as a reflector holder, and even a camera stand for small cameras like a point and shoot camera. And not just photography and filmmaking, there are so many use cases of this outside of that. For example, I remember once using it to hold down a magnifying glass while I was soldering something, and even once to hold on my phone while I was eating. So the use case scenario of this thing are pretty much limitless, and it's also pretty inexpensive. I remember buying this one for about 1,000 Indian rupees, and it's been going strong for the past 4 years. I don't think I have to say much more besides that. I highly recommend this to anyone who is into filmmaking or photography. And yeah, that was my pick, and thanks again to Suraj for having me on the show. Back at you, bro.
But yeah, that's about it for this video. This was mainly just an excuse to collab with Yash and also talk about the ND a little bit. I didn't want to make a complete review, in-depth review, but I knew I wanted to talk about it at some degree. Hence this video. If you enjoyed watching it, if you enjoyed Yash's part, please go check him out. He's super underrated. Go show him some love. While you're at it, also show me some love. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you like this video, give it a like. If you did not, vote it down. Let me know in the comments why you didn't like it. It's been Suraj. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Like Mini Mishi, my serving up every single plate. The hottest in the season, even summer looks away.
cause I got something to prove. I'm here cause I pay my dues, so please tell me something.